Welcome back to the Paranormal Girl podcast. I am your host, Kristen. If you cannot tell by that intro line, I am sick. I have been battling the most vicious mystery illness for a couple of weeks now. It even took my voice at one point, which is sincerely the best for podcasters when that happens. But I got it back, and though I can't hear anything out of my ears and probably sound like Kermit, I was so excited to get behind the mic again and get the new episode out to you guys. That being said, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I appreciate your understanding and patience with this voice. I shall keep today's intro very short. Today, I will be speaking with a fellow paranormal podcaster whose family refers to her as the Ghost Magnet. And for good reason. She's got stories for days of the paranormal experiences she has had all of her life, including poltergeist activity, a resident ghost, and a very scary encounter she had as a child with a cryptic creature. Following a word from today's sponsor, I will introduce her and bring her on for ya. Summer's coming. Is your man ready to unveil his beach bod? Our friends at Manscaped are here to ensure his body is ready for the wild with their game-changing grooming and hygiene products. Don't have your man be the guy at the beach with Austin Powers chest hair, unless you are, totally into that. I don't know. And if he has a little winter dad bod, the least you can do is to make sure he smells nice and is well groomed. It's time to get your man ready for hot boy summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off, plus free shipping with the code PNG. Manscaped is dedicated to helping men level up their full body grooming game with the Performance Package 4.0. We have talked about the Performance Package before. The Perfect Package 4.0 comes with the Lawnmower 4.0 waterproof cordless body trimmer and a ton of other liquid formations to round out his grooming routine. Whether minding his chest hair or below it, their trimmer is the best on the market and features a ceramic blade designed to cut hair on loose skin, and reduce grooming accidents, thanks to advanced skin-safe technology. And ladies can use it too. So get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PNG at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PNG at manscaped.com. Having the right tools for grooming is essential. Do yourself and your man a favor and help him upgrade his self-care. My guest is a podcaster, movie reviewer, and horror aficionado. Catch her and her co-hosts every week on the 3Haunted podcast, diving into the spooky and the spiritual, the supernatural and the metaphysical. If it goes bump in the night, on screen or in legend, you will find a fascinating and funny exploration of it on her show. She joins us today to talk about 3Haunted and some of the topics that they cover, as well as share her personal experiences with the mysterious. Please enjoy my conversation with Ashley, Lunar Goddess.
On our podcast, I go by Ashley, Lunar Goddess. That started as a joke a long, long time ago because I absolutely love anything that has to do with the moon. And not just like the shape of it, the look of it. I feel, as silly as it sounds, I feel like almost like an energetic connection to the moon, its phases. I think it's beautiful. I love researching the science behind the moon, but I also love the lore attached to the moon. So that's typically when you listen to our podcast, you see me kind of ebb and flow. I go down hard into the science of things, but then I also go right up into the metaphysical and, or as we call it, the woo woo of things. And I like to fill all the spaces in between. So, with that said, people started jokingly, my friends started calling me Ashley Moon Goddess. and then, and then it eventually, spiraled into Ashley Lunar Goddess because that sounded more ethereal. And honestly, I still sometimes have a hard time taking myself seriously when I say that. When I'm like, I am Ashley Lunar Goddess, and I try not to laugh because all I think is, good goodness, how like how pompous do I sound? But it's all fun. It's all in good fun. So, Ashley Lunar Goddess, and we have the 3 Haunted podcast, and that has been around we're on our third season, and It started with a group of us, three of us, hence the 3Haunted, and we all became friends, starting with the film world, but figured out we all have a love for the paranormal, the horror, and everything else that encompasses in our, title and our intro, everything that goes bump in the night. So
Okay, so you said that it all started in the film world. Do you all work in the film industry, or was it the collective love of horror and gore and those types of films? I did listen
that
to one of your gore episodes.
That's a great question. Actually, so two of us actively work in some aspect of the film world. So he's no longer a host on the show. Nothing bad. He just good things. He got really overbooked with film. So keeping up with the podcast was a little too demanding. So we get him on where we can, but he's more of like a special guest versus a continuous host. He's an editor, film editor, and then there's myself, and I do all sorts of aspects within film. I mostly work in commercial film these days, but anything behind the camera. This face is not for the front of the camera.
Oh gosh, you're adorable.
Eh, thanks. And then our third host, who is currently still a host,
Mhm.
he's very much on the like writing end of things, but he's not actively, he kind of does writing here and there, more of like a little side passion. And but our host who does the side passion with writing, he is very much a paranormal investigator. So,
Oh,
so-
okay,
and
okay.
that's how those two knew each other actually. They knew each other through paranormal investigations and they wanted to work on a horror project. So they talked to me.
The expert.
I love the horror, and I grew up on horror, and anybody that listens to our podcast hears me go way too intensely on how much I love horror. Um, all the horror too, like cheesy horror, intense horror, all the horror, except zombies. It's zombies are not my thing.
No, what's funny is as I was listening to one of those episodes, I can't remember which one it was. It made me think, and this is along with your movie reviewing skills, which are awesome. They're very thorough and
Thank you.
fascinating. The first movie I was ever in was a B horror. It ended up being a B horror film. It started out being genuinely like, yeah, we're gonna do it, and then like by the end of it, I was like, I am so sad I did this. This is awful.
Oh no!
So don't ever watch Spaceship Terror.
Oh, I'm so
It's
gonna watch that
don't
now.
don't review it.
I
I'm
won't.
telling you
I
right
won't.
now, it's terrible. Yeah, it's like Saw in space on a spaceship.
That sounds so fun.
That's my tagline.
Saw on a spaceship. I'm about it. Like I will watch it. Um,
Well, okay, so the podcast.
mhm.
So you had never done any podcasting prior to this. I saw a notice that you put up. You were like, you were just really enthralled with the journey of it, and I love that aspect because I think of this all as a journey. It's a growing experience. Um, how's it going for you? How is the journey going for you? Are you loving it, or the things that you just like you want in, you want out?
So I'll be honest.
Hmm.
Before we decided to do a podcast, I was like, I don't listen to podcasts. Those are lame. I'm just putting it out there, being candid. I had a chip on my shoulder. Like, really, podcasts, people that just want to talk about themselves to themselves. That was awful. I had such a judgy little hat on. Um, but COVID hit, and we had the three of us wanted to work on a project with each other. And originally it was going to be film, but because COVID and we're in three different locations, we originally were in the same location, but our film editing host, he moved out to Atlanta. I moved out, out of state as well. Um, we were in three different locations, shelter in place. It wasn't going to be a thing. We just there weren't gonna it, we weren't gonna be able to get permits or anything like that. So it was like, you know what? What can we do to stay connected? Because the three of us wanted to stay connected, work on something creative, and still, still have fun. And our current co-host, or my current co-host John, he's the one that was like, "Why don't we do a podcast?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I'll do it. And so I'm a researcher. Like, I don't just like shoot from the hip. That's just not me. And no offense, not anything against those that do, but for me, I just can't. And so I had to OCD research everything, organize everything, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready. And so we did it. Oh my gosh, we were so not ready. Um, Foundation wise, we were good. But anybody like you, I'm sure, can relate. When you start something like a podcast, you have to figure out who you are, what's your voice, what's your consistent theme, what is, or is inconsistency your theme? Like, you have to feel that and find your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that first season, like the first half season, I'm just like, you listen to yourself and it's like, oh, we were little podcast babies. We were still trying to find ourselves. and, but that's a part of the journey, right? That was part
Mm-hmm.
of the fun, is like the struggles. Like, everyone's like, wow, y'all have such a great rapport. You love each other. And I'm like, we do. But there were moments where we were like, I kind of hate you too. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I can imagine. There are days that go by that I'm just like, God, I wish I had a co-host. Like, this is so much work. But there, there's pros and cons to just being on going solo and then having a little team. People you can rely on.
Yeah, and I think that for us, it helped us learn about each other and grow closer in a way we didn't know we could. And so now that we're, 3 seasons in, I love it. Like, when we lost our host, that sounded like he passed. He did not pass. When our host had to focus on their job, um, I was like, well, how are we going to stay with 3?
Hmm.
Because that's part of who our branding is, the number 3. And then it was like, well, if we have a guest, there's always at least 3 of us. And
Yeah.
so we're like, yeah, let's do that. And we had started flirting with the idea of guests, because for us, it's like we need to find our brand before we even try and throw that onto unsuspecting, innocent people. Like, come do our podcast. So we started to figure ourselves out. But once we invited guests, we still learned more about who we are. And I feel like I'm always learning, but now I feel like I'm less, and I'm sure the guys can agree with this, I'm so less intense about like how perfect it has to be, like the every little thing. And now I'm just like, whatever. We're good. We're having fun. We're having conversations. That was good. Yeah, we're good. So I've learned to like ease up a bit on my expectations, not on them, but just like what I need to put out. Because for me, it's like, one thing I've learned is, as long as the story is good, as long as the conversation is engaging, and as long as we're being true to ourselves, people don't care if you hear something in the background. People don't care if the audio isn't like 100%. And maybe that's the film person in me, where it's like, it all has to be immaculate. And so I love the process. And I don't see an end to, I don't want out. I'm like, let's
Yeah.
keep going as long as we can keep going, even if there are no listeners. Not that I want that, but even if that were the case, I
Yeah, well,
still
you
love
you've
it.
got to you've got to love it first. Otherwise, you can have a million listeners, and you're just not going to want to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a film industry thing or something, like seeing, I don't know, that journey that you just described is very familiar. Like, I think I've let go of like being overly critical as well, and just go with the flow, man. But yeah, you guys have some really awesome guests, very knowledgeable guests. It's always funny. It's just always fun. It's a fun time. You guys also cover some really cool topics. I just had a fun time going through and just like I told you, I was spot listening, but I mean, we're talking like witchcraft and demons, and then all of a sudden like higher spirituality and ascension and astral projection. One of my favorites that I caught was about the paranormal games, and I know that's a
Yeah.
two-parter, but yes, a lot of those paranormal games, I actually covered a few of those at one point, and they freaked me out so much. So listening back through you describing them like put me in, PTSD.
We seriously, I'm not gonna lie, during paranormal games, I actually had like surfaces like mirrors covered in my office because I was freaking myself out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to repeat this game while looking at something. So um they definitely those are some of my favorite episodes, the paranormal games. I'm always excited to do it. That and the urban legends. I'm just like they
Mhm.
creep me out.
Did you, you said you had played one, you didn't know it till you described it, the egg yolk one, you had actually played it in your life,
Mhm.
but were there, what were some of the games that you played after you did those episodes? Did you try any?
No.
No?
No, and only because the ones that we bring to the table, they're not, and I'm sure you know this listening to some and researching some, like the ones we bring to the table are really like they're the heavy hitter ones. Like you're summoning demons or you're summoning something. And for me, I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't want to summon. Like, do I believe they'll work? 95% of me is like, no. But 5% is like, but what if it actually does happen? Do I
Yeah,
risk that? And
yeah.
so I talk myself out of it. I feel like John is more down. My co-host is more down to
Okay.
do like summoning things. And because he's crazy like that. But I don't I don't think I can. Um I'm trying to think if there's any that I would play. I think 11 Mile Road was the only one where I was like, "I might play that," and they're just like, "Are
Mhm.
you crazy? Really? That one?" And I'm like, "But you're driving your car, and, like, how what are the odds that's actually gonna happen?" So, and if it does, like, I feel like I don't know. It just didn't feel as, like, intensely terrifying to me, like, playing hide and seek with the demon in your home, so
Yeah, yeah, and the hide and seek, I think the hide and seek with the doll that
yes.
you,
That you
and,
stab the doll? Like, who does that?
and the midnight game. I think, out of all of the games that I've heard, the midnight game, which people might not be familiar with that who are listening right now. If you want to, would you give us just a brief overview of that game?
Oh, I have to remember that one. Would you remind
That
me?
one,
They all
okay, yeah,
mix together.
this one, like, screws with my head so hard. But basically, you write your name on a piece of paper. You set it in front of a door. You've got a candle. You light the candle, and then
Oh,
there's some
that's right.
knocking.
And you have to knock on the door.
Hmm,
I think
hmm.
it was, oh, because it varies. There one that said like 23 times or something, and one said 13 times. So
Yeah, there's
it's
variations. Yeah,
yeah, it's depending which one you're playing, you knock on the door that many times.
yeah,
And then I think you're supposed to blow out the candle afterwards, right?
yeah. Like at a very
Um
specific time.
Yeah,
Yep,
I would have to go back and get my notes because some of them start to blur because it's almost similar to the demon one where
yep.
you play
Hmm.
hide and seek in your house and you've got the candle. So because I remember specifically the midnight one that you're talking about, like, they even referenced in the game, like, write your own name because if you try to trick it and write someone else's name, like, it's extra bad for you. It's extra
Yeah,
gonna come after
yeah.
you, so
Yeah, so you're bringing this guy, this midnight man,
Midnight
into
Man,
your
yep.
home so that you can basically do hide and seek with him, but you've got this
Mhm.
candle, and the deal is you cannot let the candle go out, otherwise
That's right.
he gets you. And the game, thankfully, the game is finite, like it does end. If he hasn't gotten you by, like, I think it's like 3 or 3:30, then you've won, isn't that great?
You've survived, but what do you get? You don't get anything, unless you're playing it with a demon, in which case you get a wish. So it's
I mean, pick your games wisely, folks.
and I think the demon one was very similar to the Midnight Man, but you summon the demon in your mirror in
Hmm.
your bathroom, and but you have to carry a candle, and same thing. If it blows out the candle, you're done. And you're playing hide and seek with this demon, and they're like, if you can survive between the hours of midnight and 3 playing hide and seek, you get whatever wish. And I'm like, who thinks they'd honestly survive a demon hunting you in your home for 3 hours? I don't think I'd survive 3 minutes, much less 3 hours.
I would give myself a heart attack in that situation. But yeah, that was a new one for me. I didn't know about the demon hide and seek one. At least you get a wish at the end. That is nice. That's so nice. Um,
I don't
well,
know if you are gonna achieve it though.
so that was my favorite
Okay.
topic. They're all great, but that was my favorite topic and just had me enthralled. What is your favorite topic to cover? Because you do so much. It's such a wide variety. But what do you just absolutely love to talk about?
I love to talk about scary movies of the 80s. I love 80s horror. I love talking about paranormal games, urban legends. Just really, it's all, that we branched out with the metaphysical, and we've started talking about a little bit of extraterrestrial, which is funny because those are actually our most listened to episodes out of all of them.
It's a big community that's just,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of like there's a lot of different factions of it, all working towards this. Like that's what I'm talking about and like researching currently, and it's just so compelling. Everything that I've come across so far, like when I started, I didn't know about certain aspects of it, and I'm still going through it. Like I haven't hit crop circles yet, haven't hit men in black yet. Those are coming. uh, but it just never fails. Each new thing that I come up upon in this subject, UFOs and aliens, I'm just always kind of, I'm intrigued by the end. I'm like, oh, okay, I see how this could be. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's just a really interesting subject that's just taken me by surprise. How much I really enjoy it.
I've been surprised at how more open to like being how more open I am to being open about ideas than I realized I was because
Mm-hmm.
you know based on my experiences, I have my own beliefs, right? Of like, okay, I believe in this, but when it comes to I've not been abducted by aliens, I have not been XYZ. So I feel like we all tend to be a little more skeptical about that. And then it's like, well, I check myself and I'm like, well, just because that hasn't happened to me doesn't mean that hasn't happened. Because how would I feel if someone's like, well, I've never had a paranormal experience, so
Right.
it's not real. And it's like,
Right.
that's rude. So so I've definitely found that I've opened like you said, you just find how much it's all connected and like, maybe there is more out there than I ever realized. So
Yeah, that's so like skeptical. I know a lot of people do think that way. Well, it's never happened to me, and I live in strict reality, and there's no such thing as this other stuff. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Like I just read that
yes,
somewhere, and I was like, oh, I like
I
that.
like
Because yeah,
that.
you know what? I can believe in it. I can believe that we are not alone in this universe, and I can believe that people are actually capturing proof of this stuff on video and camera and all of that. I can believe that. I haven't seen one for myself, at least that I think. I've never been abducted, at least that I know of. But yeah, there's something out there, man.
I agree. Um, and I actually I pulled up my notes because I had the Midnight Man notes. It's 22 times that I had, I was like, what was it? I'm mixing the numbers up. It's 22 times. And you actually have to prick your finger and put your
With the
blood on
blood.
the, yeah. And I still don't get the point of the game other than is it just for a thrill? And I think we kind of talk about that in the episode is why do people
Yeah,
play these games?
yeah.
Because you don't get anything from surviving from the Midnight Man.
Like if I were to think about doing something like that, the only reason I would ever do anything like that was so that I could have proof, like
Ah,
very like confirmation, like I
okay.
cannot deny that there is something supernatural chasing me through my house, you
Ooh, I
know.
like that. Like it
Yeah.
is concrete proof there is something else.
Yeah, like I wouldn't do it for a
Ah.
thrill. Oh, I know people do.
I mean, people go bungee jumping. That's like you're plummeting. So I guess I can't judge too harshly, but it's just like we always say with the paranormal games, please don't play this, but if you do, you do it at your own risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on the paranormal, so you've never had any experiences with UFOs, aliens, but
Not
you
that I know
have,
of.
not that we know of, but you do have some experience with the paranormal itself, the mysterious. Your family calls you a ghost magnet. and I am intrigued. What happened, Ashley? What are they talking about?
Oh. How long is this podcast? No, just kidding. um, I have had significant amounts of paranormal activity growing up, and it started very young. And, um, along the way, I'm from a Hispanic culture, and traditionally, you don't really talk about that because if stuff like that is happening, at least where I'm from, that's not a good sign. It's like it's not positive. And
Okay.
so that was one of those things where it's like, shh, that's not real, or no, that didn't happen, or shh, stop talking about it. And so for me, I started learning at a very young age just not to say it, not to repeat it. So as an adult, this podcast like experience that I've had has helped me kind of remove some of that. But even now I catch myself sometimes like, oh, don't say anything. And and then it's like, wait a minute, yes, I can. And so because if people think I'm crazy, they think I'm crazy. And it will be what it will be. So as a kid, my first experience that I can remember very clearly was being very young. And um, we had lived with my grandmother, and she had turned this duplex home into one big home. She had both sides and knocked the middle wall out and turned it into a big home. And everybody was in the living room. It was past bedtime. Everybody was in the living room, adults wise. And I was asleep. I don't know why, but I was alone in my mom's room, which was around the corner. And she had this heavy king size bed, like old wooden with the big, like glass or mirror behind it. And it was big. It's not something I could move. I was pretty young. And the reason I say that is because this is something that was loud if it were going to hit the floor, and also something I could not lift by myself or probably even with help. So I had been laying in her bed and I was by myself. I could hear people in the living room and I could see the light of the TV from the living room, but the room I was in was dark. And I was feeling really just uneasy. Like something was bothering me, and I didn't know what yet because I didn't know what spidey senses were yet. And so I was just like, something's wrong. I'm a little kid, but I remember this. I'm like, something's wrong. And then I kind of froze because something just hit me. Like, don't look at the doorway. And I'm like, okay, I looked at the doorway. It's like, don't look over there. I look. And there's this because the light source is coming in from the living room and it's like a lower dim light because of the TV, all I see is a silhouette. And it's because it's backlit. And I see this really large creature. And the reason I say creature is because my grandma had cats, but this looked much bigger than a cat.
Hmm.
But it was on the ground like an animal.
Okay.
And for me, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's in the house? Like, but that's not the size of grandma's animals. And because it looked almost more like the size of a dog. And but it didn't look like a dog, if that makes sense. And so, but it started growling very, very loudly at me. And I'm thinking, this animal's gonna attack me. But in part of me, I was like, that's not an animal.
Okay. That
um,
was the feeling that you had in that
the
moment. It's
feeling I
okay.
had is that something that's not a dog, not a cat. That's something I should be really concerned about.
Okay.
And so it lunged, like attacked lunge, but it went under the bed. And here's why I described the bed. The bed from the size of the creature, ish, it sounds silly saying creature, but the size of that, it lifted and then slammed down onto the ground.
Whoa. Okay. Okay.
I don't know how that's a thing, but
Hmm.
that's what happened.
Hmm.
And my grandmother had wooden floors, so it was loud. Wood on wood, this heavy bed lift, and then wham. And I'm like, I need to get out. It's underneath me, and I'm like frozen, and I'm trying. Like I started crying because my grandma runs in, and she sees me like frozen up, and I see her, and I'm like, I jump as far as I can off of the bed towards her and run out of the room. And she's yelling at me this whole time that like I'm not supposed to be jumping on the bed because she heard the slam.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not supposed to be jumping on the bed and I'm in trouble, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm in trouble. Send me to your room. Like, I didn't even care about being in trouble. And I was like sobbing. They didn't believe me. And they're like, you were jumping on the bed
Mhm.
because they themselves, everybody in the living room had heard the bed slam. They assume I'm jumping on the bed.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
really? I'm by myself jumping on my bed in the dark. But
Yeah.
um, to this day, no idea what that was. But that was the first thing I remembered.
So you just
But
left that room and you did not go back to look and you never saw it again.
Not that, no. My grandma's house had definitely a lot of activity that I experienced, different kinds of activity, but that was the most, like, visceral one of
Mhm.
just pure terror, and I think that's why I remember it to this day is because it was just pure terror, and then having that validation because everybody else heard that, and at that point,
Yeah.
I had been laying down, and it's just like, "Oh my gosh, it's gonna eat me. It's underneath me. What's gonna happen to me?"
Do you
I don't know
think
what it was.
I mean, you must have thought about this. Do you think maybe it was a cryptid or was it something that was just wanted to look scary?
I don't know because we've talked about creatures that are dog-like, um, that have come up. There's this. It's come up where someone else has told us there are creatures called like Numena that, when they describe it, are very similar to that, but um, that other people have experienced. And so for me, I'm like, there's not enough out there, right? Like I've Googled, we have done like YouTube, we've tried to find more about it, but there's just it's either you've heard it or you haven't. But I think a lot of people have encountered like these dog-like creatures that don't really look like dogs, but you would think size-wise and like speed and stuff that people would associate, oh, that's a dog. But then they think about it and they're like, wait, that was not a dog.
So is that like where chupacabra would theoretically fit? Is it like a family of things? I've never heard of it. It's a Numena?
Numena, yeah,
Never heard
and
of that.
that's the people that I've only come across two people that actually feel like that have come across knowledgeable about it have said that they're more like they're creatures drawn to energy, high sources of energy, like areas. Like if something's about to happen or energy's building up in a spot, they kind of like moths. They're kind of like creatures that gravitate to that, but they're kind of gnarly little creatures. And um John, my co-host, had experienced that when he was in Jerome. His daughter experienced that, I think, in Colorado. And like to them, they're like, well, it looked like dogs, but I don't think. And then I describe like, because I'm more of an energy person. I'm like, the energy about that is nasty. It felt nasty. And like, um, that's, I think, what startled me more is it just felt really nasty. And so
Okay.
who knows what that was? Maybe it was one of those, I don't know. Maybe it was just a creature, a hellhound. I don't know. There's so many ideas out there, right? Of like creatures.
Yeah, yeah. It was something, and in some aspect, it had physicality because it was able to move a physical thing. Yeah, I don't know. That's I've never had a story like that before. That is
It
so
was weird.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, and the thing that's always, and this is where my family comes into play with the ghost magnet. That probably wasn't really a ghost, but to
Uh
me, it was
huh.
paranormal in some way,
Oh,
supernatural
sure.
in some way.
Yeah.
And and it wasn't my grandma's cats. But because I think she did look for she was yelling at me. It was just the cat. And she went and there was no cat in the room. I refused to go back in the room.
Hmm.
She did go into the room to
Okay.
prove me wrong. But because I refused. I'm like, you could drag me in there. I'm not staying in there. I was dead set. And I was pretty scared of my grandma, but I was that like, you're not do what you got to do, but I'm not going in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she was like, it's just the cats, but there was no cats in there, according to her. So she's like, well, it probably left. I'm like, really? Where? we came out the only way you can get in,
Find this cat,
but
Grandma.
find it. But
Okay,
It
well,
was
what are the you said that your grandma's house was especially haunted. Was that where the bulk of your activity took place?
no, actually, I've lived in quite a few homes. Probably more often than not have I had experiences in homes. Not to say every single home, but darn near. I've had some sort of activity, and that's why they're like, "You're a little ghost magnet."
Mhm.
And I've heard someone has actually told me that people that have consistent experiences, they're drawing it in versus the home itself being haunted.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if I'm drawing it in, I'd like to find the button that turns it off. But um because I don't think I get the you hear the people that are like, "Oh, grandma came to visit to say goodbye before," and I'm like, "No,
You
those are
don't want
not my ghosts.
that?
Those aren't my ghosts. That'd
Okay.
be cool
Okay.
if I had the happy ones." But there was one home that I lived in when I was in high school, and that one, it didn't matter which room I was in, because I'd started in one room, ended up taking over my sister's when she moved out. But my sister's room had the mirrors on the closet doors, and my bed faced it, and you could see just shadows jumping, no matter if it was daytime or nighttime, in the mirrors.
Oh,
And I know
no.
some people say, "Well, the lights flicker, that's what you're seeing," but I'm like, these were pretty distinct shadows, but sure. Um, to the point where other people who don't quite own up to believing in ghosts would come hang out in my room, and they're like, "I don't like being in your room."
Mhm. Mhm.
And they would leave. I was used to it. So I'm like, "Ah, whatever. It's the lights." Because that's the thing I do. I will over logic something because I'd rather say it's something ridiculously over logical than it's a ghost.
Well, and that makes sense too. If people like to think that if you focus on something, a certain phenomenon or aspect of the paranormal, you literally attract it. Like you just open up that connection to it. So it would be smart if you don't want to see it, is to over logicalize
Yep.
and give it a give it a reason, a physical reason that is happening. I
Exactly,
understand
because it's
that.
like, "Pay attention to me," and I'm like, "No, I don't there is no me. That's the light." And so, I would just ignore it. I didn't care, but, we were going to move, and we had been there a while, but when my mom's like, "We're moving," for some reason, when she told me that, I was like, "Oh, no." And she's just like, "What?" And I'm like, "The house isn't gonna let me move." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Mom, it's a feeling I have. This house doesn't want me to go." And she's like and my mom, of course, at that point in time, times have a change since then, but at that point in time, she was like, "Ashley, this has to stop. You need to face your fears. This paranormal thing you think is not real. It has to stop." And I'm like, she's like, "You're gonna stay, you're gonna face your fears." Because I asked her if I could go stay with my aunt until they moved. "No, you're gonna face your fears."
So she made you stay.
So I stayed, and
Oh.
we're moving weeks, we're packing, we're doing all this stuff. Well, there was one Saturday where we were gonna move. I think we were set to move out like 4 days later or something. There was a Saturday, all my family had come because we're a big Mexican family, and they're like, "We'll help you pack up the kitchen." So they're all cooking and hanging out and doing the kitchen, and I could hear them. And I had gone, it was like kitchen, hallway, my bedroom, bathroom on the opposite side. So there, I go to take a shower, and the wall that the bathroom is shares the wall with the kitchen where like stove and everything is. So I am one of those people that love to just blast music when I'm in the shower because then I don't hear how badly I'm singing along to it. So, so I put the radio on top of the top of the toilet seat, the edge or whatever that's called. I can't think. What are words? And so I put that on there and I'm like, put on the music, feeling good, get in the shower. I'm in the shower and precisely the moment that I get a feeling of dread, like just this dread overcame me, the shower turns ice cold.
Oh, girl,
So
you are sensitive.
So for me, I'm like, oh, and most people would like let me fix the water.
Mhm.
And the feeling hit me so intensely that I was like, I have to get out.
Okay.
I didn't touch the water. It was still running. I slide open the door because I'm like, I'm getting out. Something is just like, go. So I opened the door, go, like to step out. I did not step out because the radio flew across and slammed into the wall.
What?
Yeah, no joke. And so I stepped back in. And I was like, okay, you don't want me to leave the shower? I'll stay in here.
Shivering your butt off.
But about that time, because shares the wall with the kitchen, everybody heard that because that's how loud it slammed into the wall.
And they came
So
running in
they
and told
come
you to stop
running.
jumping on the bed.
No, they right? No, my mom like the door flies open. Thank
Uh-huh.
goodness I left it unlocked. But the door flies open. And I'm like, oh, because I'm holding my breath. Jump out, grab the towel, and I was like, I told you, and run across her into my room and slam the door. I'm like, everybody saw me naked, but I don't care because I am just like, I told you. And I don't know what, like, in that moment went through her because all I know is I'm sitting on my bed in my towel, like, this is where we're at.
Mhm.
And she walks into my room and she's like, okay, you can go stay with your aunt.
Okay, so that was the moment that your
That was,
mom.
I think, one of the moments where she's like, I don't know what the hell just happened,
Yeah.
but something is just, and her significant other at the time was just like, oh, it slid off the toilet. I'm like, yeah, and hit the wall and broke into pieces. Like,
Mhm.
or like part of it broke. It's like, okay, sure. That's what happened. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my mom's like, whatever it is, just let her, she's going. And I'm
Okay.
like, thank you very much. And I packed a bag.
So that was that the only poltergeistic activity that took place there? That's I mean, that's pretty hardcore.
That was hardcore. No, there have been some other weird things that happened that I can't explain, but in terms of moving items like that, yeah, I think that was
Okay.
the
Okay.
only thing. So there was some, that was probably the house with the most activity um
Ooh.
in terms of just, hey, I'm here. But that was, I'm just like, if that could never happen again, that would be awesome.
Okay. Well, okay. If you were the ghost magnet, are there things still happening today?
Yeah, but I think my husband might be the magnet.
Oh, that twist, a twist in the story.
Plot twist. Only because I used to think, honestly, he was my buffer.
Okay.
I always thought, like, because the activity seemed to be way less once we were living together, and say it was like sometimes still present, but way less. And it's like, oh, I almost felt really cupped to an extent. And I'm like, ooh, he's my buffer. He doesn't believe.
He doesn't believe and he's attracting.
Here's why I think it's him.
Okay.
Um, we have this ongoing joke that we have a ghost of non-essential electronics because stuff turns on, and he used to try to logic like it's people's Bluetooth, someone's whatever, but um, it doesn't make sense in certain aspects where I'm like, "Wait, how did that?" So, for example, that started happening when we lived in Minnesota. We had this house and we had gone on a trip, and this was towards the end of when we lived there. So we were actually getting prepared to move. We had gone on a trip to visit family, came back, and when I walked in the door, I was like, oh. And he's just like, what's wrong? And I'm like, this doesn't feel like my house. And he's like, what do you mean this doesn't feel like your house? And I was like, when something's your home and you've settled into it, whether you believe in this stuff or not, whether you believe in energy signatures or not, when you walk in your home, there's just a sense you get. This is home, my home. I'm all over. This is my home. When we walked in, I'm like, this feels like someone else's home. Like I just walked into a stranger's house. And he's like, well, that's weird. And I'm like, I can't shake it. Like we were walking through the whole house. He's like, maybe it's because we visited family. I'm like, okay. But all that evening, I'm just like, mm-mm. I feel like I'm a stranger walking through this house. Like
Yeah.
this feels weird. And I've never felt that before in my own home. And we've been there a while. So I was like, but okay. And he tried to logic, well, we were on a trip. That's what it is. Okay. Well, that night, go to bed. Mind you, we've lived here and we were in that home for over a year. So this had never happened. We had a light and a fan that was connected to a remote, and that was by the bed. So I would turn it off at night and then we go to bed. Well, at midnight, it went on.
Just in the middle of the night?
Middle of the night, midnight.
Oh. Oh
And I was
no.
like, "What?" And so I turned it off. And he's like, "It was probably someone's remote to the garage." And I'm like, "But our neighbors, they one, that's never happened. And two, our neighbors are garage is like way like maybe I guess the one on their other side is it could be theirs maybe, but it's midnight." And he's like, "Well, they get home late." I'm like, "Okay." And so we went to bed. We didn't have anyone behind us, so I knew that like there was nothing from that direction. And the next night, we're asleep. Midnight, boom, it turns on. And I run to the window to see if our neighbors are, coming home because you could see their garage. Nope, no one's there. Lights are off in the neighborhood. So I'm just like, "Neighbor?" And he's just like, "Well, that's weird, but it's fine." Third night happens. And I was like, "That's it." And I flipped the switch off completely, and I'm like, if it goes off and that switch, like, is off, if it turns on and that switch is off, I'm like, "We're out. I will go stay in a hotel." It didn't. It didn't after that, but I'm like, so maybe there was something setting it off, or maybe that's
Yeah.
just easier to trigger than because
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't.
about, like, the EMFs and stuff, like,
Mhm. Mhm.
those things I think are easier to trigger if it's paranormal activated than, "Hey, ghost, flip that switch." So
Right, right. I like how calm your husband was. He's like, "Well, it's probably this thing that is highly unlikely with the remotes, and oh, it's okay."
yeah, and around that same time, I would wake up at in the morning, go downstairs, and I had this office that the TV was on in there. I thought because he wakes up stupid early, and I mean like 4 a.m. He's crazy. By choice, he does that. And so I'm like, "Is he watching TV in here? I guess, but whatever." And finally, a few days later, I'm just like, "Hey, could you turn that off when you leave the office? Because that's weird." And he's like, "I'm not turning that on." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I went downstairs to get something to drink one night. It was like 3 a.m. and it was on already. And I'm just like,
What in
that's,
the world? So,
ye- yeah.
I didn't catch the time frame for this particular. Were you still feeling like you were in a stranger's home? Was this still like
It was after
ongoing?
that. Yeah,
Oh
it was after
wow.
that. Because we moved within the next, like, I think month after that. So during
Oh,
that
okay.
time, it did feel like it was odd. I felt like I was fighting it. Like, no, this is my home.
Yeah. Stand your ground. Well, what do you theorize like caused that? Because it just came on so suddenly.
I don't know. Like, I didn't know. And for me, so here's where it kind of like segues because I thought maybe it's just something in that area. Because someone said something to me a few months ago on a podcast that kind of resonated where ghosts don't haunt homes, they go where they feel most comfortable. And I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." I kind of, okay. So for me, I'm like, did we just something just kind of move over? I don't know. But we moved. I'm like, well, whatever it is, I guess it'll stay there. So, because we've never experienced that before in our homes. And then we moved here where we're at right now. And I started noticing TV would randomly be on in my
Oh
office.
no.
And I'm just like, oh, maybe that's like, I tried to use his theory. Well, maybe someone next door has like a radio or remote that super extends and it's turning it on. I don't know. But I remember sitting in my office late one night working on some stuff and it turned on and I'm looking at my neighbor's house and I'm like, all their lights are off. And I'm just like, "Shh, it's the neighbor."
You know, there is a this idea that people, like certain people, just have this effect, like living people have this effect on electronics. Like, have you ever known somebody like that where like they will literally walk by the microwave and it breaks, or whatever. Like, have you ever heard of that? Like, certain
No, but
people
I
that
I see what you're saying.
I don't know what they're putting out into the world, just higher levels of electromagnetic
It's
frequencies, and they're
super magnetic.
destroying all electronics that they come into contact with. I I could have sworn to you, like, years ago, I was one of those people because just like all of my electronics were just falling apart in my hands, like, ugh. But yeah, I have heard that. That's maybe something you could think of too.
Maybe that we're supercharged. I don't know, and that
Or
was the thing though, is like it's fairly new because we've been
uh-huh.
together for a really long time, and so it's just like, what's and so he tried to make light of it. He's like, "We have an ghost of non-essential electronics," and just to him, it needs to be funny, otherwise it gets scary, and so I'm like, "Sure, that's it," but within the last few had to been last like 4 or 5 months, I would smell cigar smoke in my office when I would walk in. None of us smoke cigars, but it smelled like very distinctly like cigar smoke. And I'm like, that's weird. We've been here a while. So it's not like stale from the room. I would occasionally smell it. And I'm like, well, that's odd. And then I started feeling this energy. And for me, like energy, I'm all about energy. I'm weird. But energy, sometimes if it's strong enough, I get a mental image. And um and so for me, I was like, well, that's weird. I see a little Asian guy in flannel. So random. He's got a flannel like coat jacket thing on. And it's like, wow, I've got a really vivid imagination because I always over
That if that's what you're seeing in your mind's eye.
I was like, well, I've got an imagination. And I always joke with my co host, I'm like, it's not real, or if it's real. So for me, it was like, well, if it's real, I think he's a little Asian guy with a flannel jacket. And I'm like, gosh, I sound crazy. But my husband, who, again, up until recently, really doesn't acknowledge ghosts being a thing, he said he had rounded the corner and could have sworn he saw this guy sitting at the table. And I'm like, what did he look like? And he just he described what I saw.
No
He's like, "I
way.
think it was like seemed like a smaller guy, maybe like an Asian guy, like a grandpa." And I'm like, "Oh my god." It's like, "You did not." And so I was like, "That's weird," because he would never have acknowledged that, like, years ago. And so
Mhm.
he's like, "But I was probably tired." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what it was." And, recently, 'cause we had an unfortunate incident where, like, our home got broken into, and right at that time, I told him, "It's weird," and he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I don't feel him anymore." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I don't feel his energy around." Like, I usually
Huh.
can feel, like it almost feels like just this little old guy shuffling around, and I'm like, "I don't really feel him," and he's like, "Huh." And, we didn't like, TVs weren't going off, anything like that. None of that was happening, and I was like, "Hmm." Who knows? And then we joked that he went to go haunt the burglars. And so we're like, "You don't mess with my family."
Yeah.
And so, um, it was just a joke. It makes the kids feel better, but, um, I think it was last week. Was asleep so hard, or this past week. He tells me the next day, "I gotta tell you something." I'm like, "What?" And I had told my daughter a week prior to that. I think Grampy Ghost, that's what we call him. Like, "I think Grampy Ghost is back." She's like, "Why?" I said, "I don't know. It might be a fluke, but just I think this was last week." I was like, I suddenly felt him, like, just shuffling around like, "Hey,
He
I'm
just
back."
showed up
Yeah,
suddenly.
kinda, like,
Yeah.
curious, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you in there? Okay, cool," and then off he shuffled, and I'm like, "I'm losing my mind," but that's what I feel, and she's like, "Oh, okay," and then a few days later, my husband, he's just like, "Man, you slept through that last night." I'm like, "Slept through what?" And he's just like, which is weird because I usually am the lightest sleeper in the house, and he's like, "Yeah, I heard something, like, really loud, and I went downstairs to check it, and the TV was on." Our big TV.
Oh. Oh,
Our
okay.
main big TV. So not the little one that always our main big one. He's like, "And it was on loud." And, he's like, "And I could have sworn when I turned the corner, I saw someone sitting in the chair."
Oh,
I
no.
was like, Grampy Ghost is back.
Grampy Ghost is back, and he's upgraded. He's like, "No, I got the big screen
I need the big
this time,
TV.
okay?
He's like, look
And
here, family.
and
This is
you're
mine.
welcome for dealing with the burglars, okay?"
Right? I'm pretty sure he went to hunt them, and he's back. He's like, mission accomplished. Don't worry.
They're in a mental asylum somewhere right now because they could have swore they saw a little Asian ghost in flannel.
I know. It's so random. But to be fair, we live in a highly populated Asian community. So for me, I'm like, did I put that in my head or is that? But then when he describes the same thing, I'm like, oh, we got a grumpy ghost.
See, that's the confirmation and the correlation that I really like to see about these stories. It just makes it so real for me, and visualizing it. This this hour has gone by.
I'm sorry, I blew your
so
hour
fast.
away.
No, that's what you're here for. But yeah, we are at the end.
Yes.
I think that is a great story to leave off on. So we'll do our final segment. It's final questions, final thoughts, and then we will close it out. Sound
Thank you.
good? All right.
Yeah.
All right, my dear. So, I don't even remember it if I said you review movies and you do awesome reviews of movies.
Thank you.
And I thought it would be fun to give you a couple of made up movie titles. And they're based on horror films, but I've replaced a word in each. What are those called? Where, you just write in the blank, you fill in what's a
Fill in
verb?
the blanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So
the
I've
Mad
replaced-
Libs.
Mad Libs, yes. So I've replaced a word. I hope that the listeners will pick up on this. I've just got a couple of titles here for you, and I was hoping, Ashley, that you would just off the top of your head give me a one-line review or tagline, either one, whichever one's easiest for you. So first movie, new blockbuster of the summer, Cocaine Baby.
And this is the horror genre.
This is the horror.
Oh man, this could go so many ways. All I can think of is "Don't tell mom the babysitter's dead."
That's perfect.
When "Don't tell mom the babysitter's dead" comes to real life.
All right. I'll take it. I'll accept it. Next one, Last House on the Blanket.
I feel like this feels more like an abstract horror we're going with here.
Ooh,
yeah,
I like it. I like the way you think.
Last house on the blanket. So surreal, you'll be wrapped up in horror.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we should have done this earlier. This is awesome. All right. Last one.
Okay.
World War P.
In the world of zombies, where feminists have had enough. I don't know why. But I went there.
The phonetic spelling of feminist?
No, I was just thinking of so I'm a little obscene here, but I was thinking of a different a word for P.
Oh.
There's a song by Prince called P Control. And so that's like where that came. I'm sorry. I went there.
I love it. I'll take it. All right. Now we are moving on to your next question. Actual question. Just curious, being into horror films as you are, what horror film could you watch on repeat?
The Lost Boys.
Ooh, I love that film.
Comedy, horror, lots of quotable lines. Like to me, it's a good marriage of repeat on horror fun. You get your gore, you get a little bit of suspense and terror. I love it. It's all good fun.
Ooh, I gotta watch that again. So good, Kiefer. All right, final question. Because you did this one time. I caught one episode that you did it, and I loved it. Tell us your worst paranormal joke. Make us groan.
No. Oh, see, now I'm on the spot, so I'm having a hard time.
Oh, no.
Can I give you a Halloween one? That's also
yes.
obscene.
Yeah.
Okay. Why can't witches have babies?
Why?
Because their husbands have Halloweenies. You can edit that out, by the
No,
way.
it's staying. It's staying.
I don't know why that one always, because it
Ah.
could be Halloweenies, but whatever. Either one.
Oh my gosh, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with you today, Ashley. Where would you like my audience to find you and tune into 3Haunted podcast?
Thank you. So we have 3hauntedpodcast.com where you can find links to all of our different episodes, as well as you can find clickable links to our guests. So if you're curious about who they are and where to find them, they're on there, as well as any kind of merch we have. But we are also on all of the streaming platforms. So you could search for the number 3Haunted, all one word, so 3Haunted, and we will pop up. We have a ghost on our logo. You can't miss us.
All right, and to close us out, would you like to leave us with a final thought, advice, or wisdom?
No matter where you're at on your journey, whether it be paranormal or starting a project, always believe in yourself and be your authentic self. Because as long as you trust yourself, you can't go wrong. Living your largest, vibrant internal truth, you will absolutely find your way.
Ashley, Lunar Goddess, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. You've been an amazing host, and I love talking to you.
Thank you, Ashley, for joining me, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's chat, you're going to love her show. Be sure you subscribe to the 300 podcast wherever you listen, and enjoy, my dears. Find all links pertaining to my guest in the show notes. Was there something you especially appreciated or loved about today's show? Have you had a similar experience you would love to share? Send a message to paranormgirlpod@gmail.com or message me on all socials at paranormgirlpod. I look forward to hearing from you. That is a wrap for today. Time to go rest my weary bones and vocal cords. I'll see y'all back here next week. Until then, my friends, stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.